My friends, welcome to another episode of the Bridging Divides podcast. I'm super excited to bring you my guest today. He is someone who has always supported me in all of my entrepreneurial ventures. Anytime that I would say, can I do a lawn mowing business or can I sell cookies or anything like that, I always remember what he would say to me, Mitch, do whatever you want, I'm watching the game. I'm just kidding, obviously. I actually have my dad here today. He's representing Hedgehog Investments. Super excited to talk to you guys about Hedgehog. I've talked to you guys about it before, previously, just on different episodes and different clips and everything, just about how amazing they are, their ethics, their morals, the value proposition of what they have. And I'm super excited to talk to my dad here, Larry Bates. He has a lot of insights in the course of his life, which, I mean, let's face it, you're pretty old now, so you got a lot of wisdom here. But I'm super excited to talk to him because he has a lot of different things that he has done between owning his own practice for, how long was that?
20 plus years.
20 plus years. Mm-hmm. Co-owned, owned by himself, any range, a huge range of investments over the years, and now working as the COO of Hedgehog Investments.
That's right.
So without further ado, welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Mitch. And it must be a good day because he admits I'm his father. So,
yeah, well, we'll see what happens tomorrow. See how well the episode does, and then maybe we'll.
You can always edit that out.
Yeah, we'll just edit the dad part out.
There you go.
Of the episode,
if necessary.
No, like I said, I mean, we've been trying to get this episode on the books for a while, but you guys are based in Utah,
correct? And
so being able to get our schedules to work right when you're in Arizona or me in Utah or however it's been. So glad we were able to get you on.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about. Kind of before we talk about Hedgehog, tell us a little bit about your experience. You co-owned the practice originally, correct?
Correct. Uh-huh.
And then was that in a different state?
It was in Arizona.
Oh, it was in Arizona.
Uh-huh.
And then how long after that did you make the transition to owning the Backworks? He's a physical therapist, right? So anytime I have any sort of back pain or neck pain, I know who to call.
And all my kids call me, and Dad, help.
I hurt.
Yeah. So I still get those dad calls. But I was initially trained in the Army as a physical therapist. Mm-hmm. I went into the Army right out of college, primarily to get that training and, of course, have the military pay for it. And the way it works, you pay back time instead of money. And so I owed them several years after that. Mm-hmm. So I worked in the military, got out of there back in the mid-'80s and joined a practice in California that actually my wife's aunt owned, and thought that was going to be more or less permanent. It ended up a couple of years long, and then we left. But as we left there, I came across a fellow in Arizona that was wanting to open a back rehabilitation clinic, and that was the focus of my interest in therapy as well. And so we teamed up and opened the Backworks in the late 1980s. And he was with me for 7 years, and then he went on to something else, and I owned it solo for another 15 years, give or take, until we closed that down. I did a variety of other things in between all of that, worked in nursing homes, did home health, and in fact, the last few years of my professional career was in home health.
I remember that.
In the meantime, of course, I've always kind of had an entrepreneurial urge, if you will, and wanted to do things that way. And so I've invested in a lot of different things as a side gig, if you will. Most of them related to real estate, but we've done a variety of different things as well.
What's the wildest one that you can think of, or kind of just totally no one would ever think of?
Well, my wife still jokes with me about my wanting to raise ostriches, but I never did do that. But we still joke about my desire. I've
ostrich eggs. I mean, you got
they're huge. I actually had a neighbor at one time. You may remember them, Mitch, when you were younger, but that raised emus.
Oh, that's right.
You remember those?
Yeah.
considerably smaller than ostriches, but they were actually kind of mean. It kind of turned me off on my desire to do ostriches. But I've had thoughts of doing a freshwater shrimp farm. Never did do that. I did start a business in vending machines for a couple of years.
I remember working for you guys for a while.
We opened an assisted living home, had it open for a year or two. I just recently got out of an investment in a mango farm in Panama.
Oh, jeez. Did you get any free mangoes?
Pardon?
Did they ship you any free mangoes?
No, they didn't.
No?
They didn't. And they had some problems. They had a fire and they had some floods, and there's just one problem after another. But so anyway, I've done a variety of different things over the years, and a lot of real estate investment opportunities that have come our way, whether it was fix and flips. We've always had a few rental properties. Mm-hmm. Currently involved in some multifamily apartment complex investing.
That's with the RE Mentor?
Yes, with RE Mentor out of
awesome.
Boston. Terrific group. And I've gone through training with several different real estate groups, and the RE Mentor training that I had, and this was about 7 years ago now that I did that, almost 8 years ago. Though I'm not actively involved in real estate investing as much now as I was in the past, the principles that they taught me were invaluable, and I continue to have a relationship with those folks because of that training.
They were very collaborative, correct?
Extremely collaborative.
In their approach. So correct me if I'm wrong. Basically, you would do kind of the legwork to find a property that was a good deal, do your due diligence and everything like that, and then you, through all of the relationships, find the right investors that are all part of RE Mentor to be able to kind of go in on this together. Is that essentially how it works?
Not all of them necessarily involved with RE Mentor, but many of them were. Mm-hmm. But you're right. And that was one of the paradigm shifts that I had to come to as I started that level of real estate investing. Mm-hmm. Up until then, I'd always done it myself. I had never considered, for instance, a property that was, $750,000 or $1 million or more. That just seemed, unbelievable to me. Couldn't wrap my head around that. I had never considered investing somewhere that I didn't actually live.
Interesting.
And RE Mentor helped change some of that. I did some other real estate training just before that with a group out of California that I don't think is in existence anymore. But that got me started thinking maybe I could invest in another area other than what they call your own backyard, the area you live in. And so I was already kind of starting to think that, but still was thinking I had to do it all on my own.
Yeah.
And the RE Mentor training showed me that, for lack of a better way to describe it, showed me that it's better to get a little piece of a lot of pies than all of one pie.
Yeah, of a smaller pie. Where do you think that mentality of you have to do it on your own stemmed from? Because that's something that I think we all struggle with. It's a very common belief that you got to go it alone and you got to be a self-made person. Where did you think that stemmed from for you?
That's a great question, Mitch. As I reflect on that, I think part of it stemmed from the way I was brought up. My father was a baker. When I was a very young boy, he bought his own bakery after working for Albertsons actually for a while. He bought his own shop in the early 60s, and as I look back, he had opportunities to grow that. He had opportunities to make it bigger and make it more than just a one-store operation, but he didn't really have the drive or the ability, I don't know exactly what, but he never really pursued those things. We grew up relatively poor. As I look at it now, at the time, we were in a small town in Utah. And
what else do you know?
Everybody was poor, So if everybody's poor, you're all rich.
Yeah.
So I didn't really consider that we were poor, but we were, and I think my father. One example, he always carried a very thick wallet and he always had a lot of cash in it. We didn't have a lot of money, but he always carried a lot of cash. And I think it stemmed from his growing up in the Depression and afraid that he was going to run out of money, or afraid he was going to get caught somewhere where he didn't have anything. And so he always wanted to have some backup cash that he could fall back on. So it was just a kind of almost a hoarding attitude.
Interesting.
And I think that's part of where I got those feelings.
Kind of passed down.
Yeah, even into my marriage, it was, I'm the guy, I need to control the money, I need to make all the decisions money-wise, which I've since learned is not healthy. But I think that's where those attitudes came from, the way I grew up.
It's interesting. I don't know if you've heard of this before, or if you guys have, but they did a study of fleas. Have you heard about this?
I don't think so.
They put them all in a jar and wanted to see how many would jump out. Mm-hmm. And they kept the top open, and all of them would jump out. Then they put a lid on, and then over a very short period of time, they would only, they would obviously, hit the lid. They took the lid off, and they didn't jump out.
Because they'd been trained to stay in.
Trained to stay within that ceiling. The wildest part is that got passed down to the offspring of the fleas. The fleas that they had, that were their children, would also not jump above that ceiling.
Even though they'd never hit the lid themselves.
They'd never been through it, but because the parents had. So it's interesting how those things get passed down, and it's kind of up to us. And I've been seeing it more, from my perspective, having kids, of which I have a lot. Half your grandkids belong to me. But it's interesting how, even with your dad, you kind of fix something from the past, put some of those broken pieces maybe back together, and pass on a larger piece to you, and then you to me. Joke obviously about the entrepreneurial thing here at the beginning of the episode, but you were always very supportive of us making it on our own. If we wanted to buy something, it wasn't, no, we can't afford that. It was, what are you going to do to earn the money? Mm-hmm. If you want to buy it, then you go out, you either get a job or you find some creative way, to make money. And so it is interesting, though, how those things can get passed down. And then when we can find a way to find a better way, then that's what you pass down as well. And then now hopefully I can pass it down to my kids, where Mitchie, my oldest, I told you about the Snow White toilets is what he calls them.
And no, I don't remember that one.
Thrown so clean they're fit for royalty or something, something like that.
Oh, this was a little business he wanted to start.
He wanted to clean people's toilets, and can I go door to door? And I'm like, oh, you're a little too young, to have me feel comfortable having him go door to door. But he's always thinking of something. But
that is interesting, and a lot of our attitudes are our desires, our likes and dislikes certainly develop as we're growing up, and the way that our parents parented us impact that. Some of which, is negative, much of which is positive in my case. And so as we get into adulthood, I think it's imperative that we look at those things and where those attitudes came from. And those that are not consistent with where we want to go, we change. Mm-hmm. I think my parents did a great job of rearing me, but I think I'm obligated to do a better job than they did, because I think each generation should grow. Mm-hmm. So hopefully, your generation is even better than mine. So
here's a good question. It's one that I've thought about, because I do a lot of networking, which mm-hmm. and I talk to a whole huge range of ages. I mean,
right.
Somebody in one of my groups that was in their 80s all the way down to, I think she was 16, 17. It was just, love that principle in general. But I've heard people that in whatever stage that they're in, that don't think that they can, learn something new, or it's kind of a very fixed mindset, as opposed to having that growth mindset of always learning. I'm too old, I'm too this, I'm too that. How have you tried to stay open? Because you mentioned several lessons that you've learned along the way. But how do you stay open to learning new things?
Great question. I think I've always been open to it because I've always loved to read. In fact, when early in our marriage, Shannon and I, my wife and I would read all the time. She didn't grow up reading much at all, and didn't come into our marriage with that attitude. And so I would find books that I thought would interest her and encourage her to read. Now we both read voraciously and love to read to each other from time to time out loud.
I always remember that from growing up. You guys were always reading something.
But there was a time she really didn't read, and you were probably too young to remember because it was early in our marriage. But so I think reading is one way that you just keep learning, because my head is full of absolutely useless facts because I read a lot.
We text each other all the time with like, hey, did you know this random thing, or like this word or whatever. We're huge nerds, and I read a lot too, and I think that. And
invariably, I when you send me a word like that, I kind of know the word. Sometimes I'm not sure exactly what the meaning is, but I've just come across a lot of stuff. So, incidentally, one of the things that has helped. When I was younger, I was pretty shy, and I got teased a lot in school. I wasn't really a popular person in school, and didn't really want to put myself out for fear of looking stupid, which I'm sure is not uncommon.
Oh, I did it all the time.
But my wife is just the opposite. She's very outgoing. She's never, met a person she didn't like and couldn't get along with, and so she has, in a lot of ways, taught me to get out of my comfort zone. And between that and doing physical therapy for many years and interacting with a lot of different people, I have come to realize that I can talk with just about anybody, and find something in common with again, anybody I've ever come across. I can find some commonality because invariably I've read something about something they're interested in, and so it's really helped me in my business endeavors, a lot of other endeavors that I've had, to be able to relate to people, because I do have all this, some say useless, not all of it's useless, but information stuck in my head that I can call upon. And so it's helped me, even though I never considered myself a good networker. I still don't consider myself nearly as good as you are, Mitch, because you just naturally do it. But
probably get that from.
But I can talk to people now and interact with them and network in a business setting, or just relate in a work setting or a religious setting or whatever the case may be. I can relate to people more easily because I've read a lot. So that's a big way that I have gotten over some of those things and that I had from my youth and have continued to learn into adulthood. One of the things that I always fear is, and I've read many times, that people, when they retire and just stop interacting with people and stop doing anything, is that they just kind of shrivel up and die, and it hastens their demise when they don't stay active. And so I've enjoyed. I don't know that I put myself out to learn new things nearly as much as I did when I was 20 or 30, but I still find opportunities through interactions with other people, and through now a job change that I took over a couple of years ago when I came on to Hedgehog, because it's very different than physical therapy was.
Yeah.
But just being open to exploring new things. Some you might like, some you might not, but I think it's important to continue that, as long as you live.
Yeah, that's actually a perfect segue into the next portion, which I want to talk about Hedgehog.
Okay.
Because it was founded 4 years ago now, 5?
Yeah, a little over 4 or 5 years ago.
And when all of this was happening, so my brother is the co-founder along with Josh Bishop, just absolutely awesome people. But when I heard of the idea behind Hedgehog and the goals and the values and morals and everything of what was trying to be accomplished, obviously I was very much on board. Just loved the idea. What led you to invest, and then two, to take on this larger role. I mean, you're not just an investor anymore. You are the COO
right.
of the company.
Yeah, and I appreciate that question because it happened so gradually. I sometimes don't remember all of the whys and how it came about. But of course, I was doing physical therapy and had actually changed companies a few times. About 5 years ago, for instance, we moved from Arizona to Arkansas to help with one of our daughters that needed some help there, and I just changed jobs. And luckily, in physical therapy, I've always been able to find a new job if I needed one.
Pretty in demand.
Within hours or the next day.
Because we're all lazy and we sit around.
Because everybody needs physical therapy, it seems, and so that's always been easy. So I've been able to move if I needed to, but. I was investing with my wife as one of my side gigs. I mentioned 7 years or so ago going through this RE mentor training, which trained me to invest in apartment complexes. They also do commercial investing and different things that I never really got into, but it was primarily investing in apartment complexes. So
that's what you're drawn to more.
Living in Arizona, I was traveling to St. Louis area. Mm-hmm. That was the main area that I focused on, and we ended up purchasing a 128 unit property in St. Louis, and then which is another story we may or may not get into, but one of my partners from that deal asked me to join him in a deal in Memphis, which we still are in, and it's 228 units in that apartment complex. So I had some experience gaining more experience in putting together these complex syndicated real estate deals, finding investors, finding partners, putting all the pieces together. And early on in that training, Shannon got busy with some things and really couldn't participate with me much. And so she asked if I wanted to put somebody else in her place, because the package that I had purchased was for 2 people. And Matthew, who now is in Hedgehog, at the time he was not doing that. He's a software engineer by training, and
he's the other co-founder.
The co-founder,
I don't think I
of Hedgehog, and he had some real interest in real estate investing, and so I asked him if he would like to partner with me and take his mom's place in this training that I was going through. So he did, and so together we worked through these properties that we acquired and partnered with. And so about 5 years ago, he had an opportunity with his best friend, Josh Bishop, to invest with a fellow who Josh had done a favor for, and so he invited Josh and Matthew to invest with him. He's a fairly wealthy fellow and had interest in a lot of different companies, but one of them was actually a partnership of 3 companies that he had been working for up to 15 years at that time, helping companies repair their credit and qualify for long-term financing with banks.
So he had quite a track record with that.
He had a great track record. Had never had a failure. He's very careful and meticulous in what he did, and so he just was. It was going very, very well. But he financed that with his own money, which again he had quite a bit. But he also would include some close friends as they came around, and he needed extra investors. He would ask them to invest with him or give them the opportunity, and they could get a great return at the time. And by great, I mean upwards of 30% or more annually.
Gosh, yeah, that's high.
And so he invited Josh and Matt to invest with him, which they did. And very quickly, they realized that this deal that he had going was really terrific. And with Matthew's experience with me raising money for syndicated real estate deals, he and Josh went to this fellow. His name's Will Vigil, and they said, Will, this is our experience. We think we can raise money to help you scale your business. And what do you think? And he said, well, I've never done it quite that way, but I'm willing to give it a try. And to his credit, he's a terrific guy, and he really has taken them under his wing and mentored them very well.
A real quick question. Do you think that the learning to do that with RE Mentor, because it was you and Matt that would essentially raise funds to be able
Right.
to invest in these properties.
Right.
Do you see that directly translating over to
Absolutely.
to this?
Absolutely.
It's fascinating how that can work. You wouldn't think that. I mean, he wasn't thinking that when he went into RE Mentor.
No.
But
no.
then that was just something that came up later.
Yeah, and that's why I say the training that RE Mentor gave me, even though we're not actively seeking real estate properties now, their training has translated into so many other areas,
That's
including Hedgehog.
No,
So,
I love that.
Which is a great principle to remember, because you never know where those little nuggets of truth are going to come from.
Yeah, for sure.
So as they realized that this investment opportunity was a terrific one, and Will agreed to let them start raising money and partner with him, basically, and Will help them form this company, Hedgehog Investments, and kind of as the money raising or the fundraising arm of this partnership. And it just has taken off, better than they ever hoped or expected. In the 4 years plus that we've been running, we've gone from zero to almost $30 million under management now. And
What $30 million of investors' money.
yeah.
Wow.
Which is interesting, because one of the paradigm shifts in my mind
I was going to say, that's a huge one.
was dealing with all these zeros. I mean,
That's a lot more zeros than we've ever experienced.
like I had never considered buying a property that was $1 million.
Yeah.
And here I am, partners in properties that are several $1 million and, 200 or 300 doors, apartment complexes. But so, considering that I was going to be part of a $30 million company, which, we're looking at in the next 2 or 3 years probably being at $150 million.
Wow, that
just
blows my mind.
Boggles my mind too. But
I'm sure that there are some people out there like, oh yeah, 150 million, like big deal, but.
Yeah, in fact, it's a little side note, but I ran into a guy a year ago at a conference I went to, and he liked our presentation of what we do, and he said, but your returns are kind of low for what I look at. And I thought, we offer 20% return, up to 20%, even a little more in some cases, which is a pretty good return in most people's books. But he said, yeah, you're a little low. And I said, what do you do? He said, I'm an international banker. I said, okay. He said, I return on average 60% a year to my investors.
That is just like stupid money.
I said, 60%? I thought
insane.
20% was astronomical.
You double your money.
He said, well,
no time.
the only problem is the buy-in's $50 million. So obviously I told him to come back and talk to me next month.
Yeah, if only.
But those kinds of returns are out there. This has opened my eyes to all the stuff that are possibilities. But anyway, back to Hedgehog and how they started. Because their growth looked very good early on, and incidentally, Matt came to me as he started it and said, "Dad, this is what I'm doing," and we're looking at returning 20%. And I said, "Matt, that looks too good to be true," and it really did. I mean, I've been in a lot of investments before that offered great returns, but many of them were too good to be true, unfortunately. But of course, it's my son, so I felt some obligation to invest with him. So I gave him some money, and it worked well, just like he said. So I gave him some more, and pretty soon, most of my retirement's with Hedgehog, and it has turned out to be exactly what he described it to be. And the nice thing is, it's allowed us to provide, again, what I consider high returns. 20% annually is high, especially when banks are paying next to nothing. And
well, if you'll 20%, you'll double your money in what, 3.5, 4 years.
Yeah,
I mean, that's amazing.
Which is terrific returns. And of course, I'm at a different stage of life than he is. I'm 66 years old now, and so I don't have a lot of time to work out from under bad decisions, which I've done in the past.
Yeah.
Worked out from under a lot of them, but some worked well, some did not. But I've always had a good job that I could use to work out from under these issues.
That's true. Fall back on that.
At my age now, I don't have that kind of time, and so I wanted something that was very secure, but could still help me grow. And so Hedgehog has given us a way to offer investors a very good return, very low risk, because we've taken significant measures to reduce the risk, and we even increase the returns for people that are veterans, for instance, or first responders, and people that we feel like need a boost up and aren't rewarded for what they do for us, and we give them a little extra return. So
that was one of the things that really drew my attention. I'm going to cut you off, but I guess I did technically mean to cut you off.
No problem.
Apologize for it. But that was one of the things that really drew me to you guys is you didn't need to do that.
Right.
I mean, most of the investors would be happy with 10%, but being able to say, no, well, we want to do that because of something that we think that they deserve.
And it's rewarding, especially because we don't give it just to those that have actively been in those jobs, but family members of people who have been in those jobs. So if an investor or potential investor has a parent that was active duty military, unless they were Marine, we don't count Marines. No, I'm kidding. I was in the Army and
was in the Navy.
Mitch was in the Navy.
I
which
barely made it in.
We don't count Navy guys half the time anyway. But no, I enjoy ribbing other military.
We won't even talk about the chair force or Air Force. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. Anyway, it's been rewarding to be able to tell someone who, like you said, is happy with 12%, which is our lowest return. And we have investors that are at that level, 12 and 15%. But to tell them, even with a minimum $50,000 investment, we can give you 20% because your father was in the Korean War,
right.
or because one of your children worked as a fireman for a few years, or another first responder, or a nurse, spouse is a nurse, whatever. But be able to reward the families of those people with these great returns. So that's been real rewarding for us as a company.
Because the sacrifice of being in one of those positions, first responder, military, nurses, is not just the individual in the job. I mean, my wife and kids, I mean, we went through that where I'd come home and they'd say, is Dad leaving tomorrow? Like when I got out, finally, that was the question. I got home that day and, is Dad leaving tomorrow? And it was just like, oh my gosh, so it's a huge toll. So I love that you guys do that.
I remember when Matthew, the Hedgehog's co-founder, was deployed to Iraq. What my wife went through, it was harder for her than it was for me. But what she went through, just having a son that was in an active war zone. I remember I have another son, Spencer, whose wife is a nurse, and hearing stories about her coming home during COVID, after working unbelievable hours and so hard. She was in a cardiac care ward at a hospital, but at that time, every ward became a COVID ward.
Oh my gosh.
What she went through, coming home in tears, the family, trying to support her, so families serve right along with the members, and so we've tried to reward the family members as well. But Hedgehog has given us an opportunity, like I said, to give good returns to average everyday investor people. Yeah. And we have some folks that have $1 million or whatever with us, but the vast majority of our investors are $50,000, $60,000, $75,000.
And an average investor.
And hopefully start young, and by the time you're my age, you got a really nice nest egg.
Yeah.
So that's been rewarding, but it's so different from what I used to do. Yeah. We talked about continuing to learn, and one of the things that I've had to do, obviously, is, and it's been a much easier transition than I make it out to be, but because I was already involved with investing on the side anyway. But learning how to deal with these kinds of questions and these kinds of issues in the financial world, as opposed to in the medical field, in physical therapy, which I was doing. It's been interesting and rewarding to make a change like that. And I've been, though I was one of the very early investors with Hedgehog, which again was 4+ years ago, I've only been working for Hedgehog for a little under 2 years.
Oh, that's right. I remember that.
Yeah. So I retired from physical therapy and immediately went to work with Hedgehog and doing what I do now.
Was it just because you enjoyed it, or like what was the reason to shift over from physical therapy to?
Well, I had been
working for an investment company.
Yeah, I had been kind of advising Matt and Josh from the outset, as they needed it, just because I have some experience in business, mm-hmm. and answering questions about, what do we do here, what do we do there, and sometimes I had the answers, and a lot of times I didn't. But luckily, they had a mentor in this Will Vigil fellow who did have the answers and helped them through a lot of those things that I couldn't help them with. But I was involved in the background, basically from the start. But got more and more involved as they continued to grow. Being able to help build something has always interested me, which is probably why I liked entrepreneurial things. But it gave me an opportunity to start early and see something grow, and of course prosper from that. Yeah. Get the advantages of that growth and benefiting myself and our family from it. So that's always been of interest to me, and so it was an easy transition.
That's cool. So you talk about how you've done so many different things, and we have failures, and the way to move forward is through going through failure. And speaking of failures, let's talk about your kids. No, I'm just kidding. But one of the things that we always saw as kids was, this is something that I distinctly remember of seeing so many different investments, and I saw sometimes when things were more stressful because you had lost a large sum of money, or one of these things that happened. What is one of the biggest failures or mistakes that you personally have made through this journey that we can learn from, so that we can avoid that same mistake?
Oh, let's see. One of the mistakes I think I made, and this I mentioned earlier that we started a vending company, vending business on the side at one point. As I look back on it, I started it for the wrong reason. I had a child that was struggling, and I started it thinking it would be a good job for him. And he had no interest in it, and so it ended up, coming back to me and then to my wife, and neither one of us wanted to run the day-to-day part of a vending company. So I think going into things with your eyes wide open and doing things for the right reason is one lesson I learned there. Another lesson I learned from that is to really research it well before you go in. We got talked into a package of vending machines that was. I think we paid a little over $50,000 for these machines. Yeah. They probably were worth half that, or a third of that.
Oh my gosh!
In fact, when I ended up selling them a few years later, I probably got a fifth of what I paid for them.
It's a big facepalm moment.
And so had I really looked into vending deeper before I jumped into it, I would have realized I could have gone to Costco or Sam's Club and bought a vending machine.
You see them all over the place.
Yeah, for a fraction of what I paid for these things, and basically would have done the same thing. And so I think educating myself about a venture like that before jumping into it is doing your due diligence is very important. It's something that I learned from that. We lost a little bit of money. We not a ton, but it was a lot of work that we just didn't want.
It's just like the time that you can't get back.
It was not the right time. We started this assisted living company, like I mentioned. And
I remember that.
You lived through that. And
Paul, that guy.
We learned a lot of great things, and we really felt inspired to do that. And I don't regret doing it, even though it only lasted a year and a half or so, and it somewhat disrupted our family as we moved kids back and forth from one house to another. But
I loved it. Paul, that guy had mentioned, is always these crazy stories in his 80s.
Paul was a fellow that came to us already on hospice. He had a brain tumor and ended up passing away in our facility.
He was awesome.
It was a great experience for us and for the kids, and so we really enjoyed that. But so you learn through successes and you learn through mistakes. Luckily for me, as I mentioned before, I always had a job as a physical therapist that, though it didn't pay great, it always paid well enough that and of course I was young, I had time and an income that I could work my way out from some of these things that didn't pan out the way I wanted them to. And
so you took calculated risks, because
right.
Obviously any investment has a risk, right? I'm no financial advisor here, but I mean that's just part of the.
Well, and I've heard people say, if you're going to do something like that, one of the best ways to do it is to go in so whole hog, if you will, that you've got to succeed. Go in without a safety net, and you're forced to succeed.
Which I mean, I can see
which I understand,
the benefit, but man,
that's a tough
when you got
pill
kids,
to swallow. Yeah,
wife and kids that you're the provider
so,
for. I mean, that's
so. Luckily, I never had to do that.
Yeah.
I always had a backup, and for better or worse, I could always work my way out from under bad decisions.
No, I think that's a great takeaway, and you're proof that does work. Mm-hmm. You don't have to go full hog, like you said, whole hog, to be able to succeed. You know, that was one of the things that I struggled with. I had an opportunity to go into a business with somebody, and he was like, "Yeah, you got to quit your job." And I was like, "Yeah, I just can't do that." And so I backed out. Come to find out, it did not go well. Mm-hmm. The people involved were up a creek, so to speak. But
well, and that brings up an interesting point about partnering.
Yeah.
One of I mentioned early on in my career, I wanted to do things by myself. I wanted to own a practice by myself, although I did go into private practice with a partner, which I would never have done had I not had this partner. So that was my first experience realizing that maybe partnerships are not, all bad. Okay. Certainly, you end up being married to that partner, and for better or worse. And in this case, after 7 years or so, and our business had done okay, but it not had grown like we thought it would. And so he decided to go to move elsewhere and go on. And it was a very amicable split at that point. But
got divorced.
We got divorced, and I got to keep the kids. the practice, for better or for worse. But he went on to something else. He was a serial entrepreneur, and he had done a variety of different things. But I started learning that partnering is not. Sometimes there's no other way to get where you want to be other than to get a partner and bring somebody in that brings a set of skills that you don't have.
Yeah.
And when I realized that, and especially my real estate training taught me that lesson, there's no way I could have brought down a $5 million apartment complex without having the right partners involved.
I mean, you just weren't in the position. I mean, you look at our mentor and how, one, they trained you, and then you built the connections, and then also were able to provide the funds. It's like one of my favorite things that Arnold Schwarzenegger had said. He's like, "You can call me Arne and Schnitzel," like all these other things. He's like, "But don't ever call me self-made." It's like nobody is self-made. He's like, I had the people that trained me, bodybuilding. I had the people that helped me come to America, helped me get into acting and directors and all these different people, And so it's just right along with what you said.
Well, and I remember a politician couple some years ago. I won't mention their names, but they now have an airport in Little Rock named after them. But one of their sayings was, "It takes a village."
Yeah.
You've heard that.
Yeah.
And at the time, I detested that saying just because of the people that said it, because I didn't appreciate them personally or their politics. But when I look at it, it really does take a village of people, a group of people, all with different skill sets and all working together toward a common goal to really succeed the way we want to succeed.
Yeah.
And again, that was a real paradigm shift that I had to go through in my investing and in my career development. Had I made that shift much earlier, and some of my children, you and Matt and others that I've mentioned, have been far more successful at a far younger age. But it's never too late. And
yeah.
I started investing in multifamily real estate in 2017 in February. So it'll be
6 years ago.
It'll be that. It'll be 8 years now in February.
Gosh.
This February.
Yeah. It's wild.
And I remember, because I keep track of my total net worth. At one time, it had been fairly significant. I had some real estate holdings, and then a real estate crash happened, and those all went away. But the year that I started in multifamily, because I had some money that I put out to get started in that, I think our total net worth, and this was by this time I'm 57, 58 years old. Our net worth was less than $50,000 as a family. And then
that hurts.
Each succeeding year it got much better and much better, between multifamily and then with Hedgehog. But it's never too late to start that, to learn some of those lessons. Obviously, the sooner you learn them, the better, but it's never too late.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that mentality in general. There's a book by Dr. Carol Dweck, which if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. It's called Mindset. Beautiful book where she talks about the fixed and the growth mindset, and I mean how you can succeed with one and not with the other. As we land the plane, so to speak, here, one of my favorite segments that we have on every episode is the Positivity Prizefighter segment. Which a very Rocky-esque sort of way. You don't lose a prize fight by getting knocked down. You lose if you don't get back up, right? And that is really what embodies positivity in my mind. It's not just sunshine and rainbows. It's, are you going to get back up because you believe that it's worth it? So what's a time that you could think of in your life where you got knocked out flat and you down on the mat and at risk of not coming back up, but you did, and what you learned from it?
That's a great question, and it reminds me of a couple of sayings, and I'll start with those. One is from my religious background, one of our church leaders from a century ago, talking about trying to stay on the right path, so to speak. And his comment was, "It's not so much that I stay on the path as I try to cross it as frequently as I can."
Who was it that said that?
J. Golden Kimball.
Okay, cool.
Meaning that every time you stray from the right path, you change direction and get back on it, and you might veer off the other direction, but you get back on it. And the other comment was it's something to the effect that it's not whether you get knocked down, it's whether or not you get up one more time than you're knocked down. Something like that. Yeah. Indicating, everybody gets knocked down and everybody has difficult times, but you got to get back up. You got to get off the mat, like Rocky. If you get up, off the mat one more time, and you get knocked down, then
that makes the difference.
Yeah, it makes the difference. And so, we've all had difficult times in our life, and we're all going to have them. I mean, I think that's part of life's purpose, if you will, is to learn and to grow and to realize what's inside of you. I certainly believe in God, and I think He knows what's inside of me, but I don't know what's inside of me. Mm-hmm. And so going through those difficult times teaches me what I can do, gives me the confidence that I can do it. Most of the difficult times that I've had, and I won't mention which kids, but relate to my kids and the struggles that they've had. It's we've, as you know, Mitch, we've adopted a couple of children from foreign country, and we got them when they were older and didn't know the history that they've had. Both of them have struggled because of the abuse and such that they suffered when they were younger before we got them. Mm-hmm. One of the things, as I was thinking about preparing for this podcast, is remembering a conversation that my wife and I have had multiple times, that we kind of went out on a limb when we had decided to adopt, because we really didn't know what we were getting into. Mm-hmm. Certainly with international adoptions, we had no clue, because we got no history to speak of with these kids. But she admits now that because of some trauma in her life early on, my wife, as a child, and how it clouded her reactions to things later in life, she would never have addressed those issues had she not been forced to by addressing the issues of these girls that we adopted.
Interesting.
So the lesson that I've learned from that is that you can't be afraid to do things just because, what if? Well, yeah, what if? You don't know what if, because you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But those trials that you step into, fall into, are forced into, whatever, can end up benefiting you in ways that you have no idea. And so we can't be afraid to take steps in our lives just because of what may happen. We've had other issues with our children that have been just heart-wrenching, and to the point that sometimes all I can do is grab my wife and say, somehow we've got to get through this. Yeah. Or my grandchildren. I remember a very difficult time I had once with an issue at church that I was dealing with. And I came home from that just absolutely wrung out, just having to deal with this issue. I just felt like the world had beat me up and spit me out. And as I got done with that, it was on a Sunday evening, and those in the family that were around my wife's parents had gathered at their house for Sunday dinner or whatever, which I had missed, but I got there after dinner, and one of my little grandsons, his name's Owen, and he was probably 2 or 3 years old. I dragged myself into the house, and my wife immediately could see that I was just wrung out, and I couldn't tell her what I had done because of confidentiality issues, but she knew that I had had a really difficult afternoon and evening. But when I saw my grandson and grabbed him and held him, suddenly the whole world was okay, because I love this little boy so much, and I've learned that God gives us loved ones around us, and the strength that we draw from them for a purpose to help us get through these difficult times. It may be a spouse, it may be a child, it may be a grandchild, it may be a good friend, but there's always people around us, hopefully, that when things are really, really tough, we can put our arms around, or they put their arms around us, and suddenly the world's okay.
I love that. No, thank you for sharing that. That's one of the things that we talked on a previous podcast with Alyssa Jones. I'll put a link in the description, but she talks about one of those positivity prize fighter moments for her, and the way to get through it was through an outpouring of love. Yeah. From family members to help the individual that was having a hard time, to help her, and that's how they were able to move forward. So no, thank you so much for sharing that, and
You're welcome.
Thank you for being on. I mean, this has just been absolutely great.
It's been a pleasure.
And I hope you guys have liked it. If you've gained value from this, please, leave a like and a comment in the description with what you liked from it. And remember, guys, we need to feel the fear and do it anyway. I've talked about that book many times, and gosh, I can't remember the name of the author, but I will definitely put a link in the description. But you guys can do it. We can do it. You can get through anything. As long as you're still breathing, you can get through it. And I love you guys. We'll see you on the next one.